Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the channel. This is the Bryant Report, and I'm your host, Mike Bryant. And I think I've got another good one for you in today's episode. We're continuing on in the Buford Pusser series, of course. And tonight we're going to talk about uh, something that happened uh, on the evening prior to the ambush. Um, in August of 1967, where Pauline Pusser was murdered and Sheriff Buford Pusser was wounded. And it involves the old Hickory Grill parking lot, and it involves two women that allegedly were witnesses to some sort of verbal altercation between Buford and his wife, Pauline, where Pauline threatens to leave Buford and threatens to expose his corruption, go to the TBI and the FBI and tell all the bad deeds that Buford was involved in. And then Buford threatens to kill her. Uh, Now, I first heard that story uh, before I've seen anything from the TBI report. I actually read that story in Mike Elam's book, Buford Pusser, The Other Story. And of course, now that book was published in 2020. Uh, and then, of course, the TBI report came out, and that story made its way into the report. However, it was not told by the two women that were involved. It was told by two women, Tammy Johnson, who was the daughter of Barbara Bivens, who, well, I guess I should have set that up first. The two women in the parking lot that supposedly witnessed this was Barbara Bivens and Shirley Smith. Now, Shirley Smith was married to Junior Smith, and they co-owned the old Hickory Grill off down by the state line area in McNairy County, Tennessee. And but those two women did not relay that information to the TBI either back then or recently. Of course, they were both, Barbara Bivens passed away in 2008, and Shirley Smith, I do believe, passed away in 2019. And you can correct me on that in the comments if I got that wrong. Uh, so obviously, they wouldn't have been around to tell the current investigators of the TBI that story. So that begs the question: where did that story come from? Did it even happen? Who? And if it didn't happen, who created it? When? And so, but back to the TBI report. The two women that relayed the story to the TBI is Tammy Johnson, who I believe is the daughter of Barbara Bivens, and Teresa Smith, who is the niece of Shirley Smith. And, supposedly they had heard that story, from their relatives sometime before they both passed away. And that's who relayed the story to the TBI, the current TBI investigators, for this report. And so, I guess we'll go ahead and start with the first, with the TBI report document that's in there outlining this. So let me see if I can go ahead and pop that up on the screen here for you. And there we go. So yes, this is what's in the TBI report that just came out this summer. And by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but in another video, but I did send off and order a copy of the TBI report. I'm not getting I didn't pay for the $400 paper copy. I ordered the $50 thumb drive with all the files on it. And I did get notified this week from the post office that is supposed to be arriving this coming Saturday. So I'm anxious to get a hold of that and dig further into this. Um, Now there are some audio recordings, and there is an audio recording of this particular interview that took place, and I don't have it at the moment. Like I said, I won't get my copy of the TBI report till Saturday at the soonest. But the audio recording is out there if you guys are interested in hearing it. The Hatfield and McCoy channel, Fred and Sheila McCoy, they've had a copy of it, and they've done like I think 4 videos on it by now. And so if you're interested in actually hearing the recording, I'm going to put a link to their channel so you guys can go check that out. It's quite interesting. I've been watching those videos, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in that recording. But I'm going to stick to the paper copy that I have right now. And, if I get the files, maybe I'll do another video on that recording. But let's get into it right now. So yes, this is the paper copy of that interview, and let's see if I can zoom it in a little bit more for you. And this took place May 1st, 2024, in Corinth, Mississippi, at the Starbucks. And that brings up a good question. I've been seeing a lot of these meetings have been taking place at various restaurants, coffee shops, and I'm just curious: did the TBI spend tax dollars, paying for these people's Starbucks coffees? And I know that they met with Dennis Heath Hathcock at the Cracker Barrel for breakfast one morning, and I'm wondering if they picked up his breakfast tab. But that's just just a little side conversation to all this. Just curious if anybody has those answers, they can leave those in the comments. But yes, this took place May 1st, 2024, Corinth, Mississippi. It was at the Starbucks located off of US 72. Took place right at noon. And the TBI agents were Michael Parson and Brent Booth, and they met with Tammy Johnson and Teresa Smith. And so we'll actually hold on here. Let me scroll down here. The reason for this meeting was due to information that Tammy Johnson's mother, Barbara Gail Drury Bivens, and Teresa Smith's aunt, Shirley Smith, overheard an argument between Buford Pusser and Pauline Pusser. Agents note, Barbara Gail Drury Bivens and Shirley Smith are deceased. The significant information from this meeting is that both Tammy Johnson and Teresa Smith stated that Barbara Gail Drury Bivens and Shirley Smith overheard an argument between Buford Pusser and Pauline Pusser in the parking lot of the Old Hickory. It's easy for me to say. Old Hickory Grill in Guys, Tennessee, in the early morning hours on the same date that Pauline Pusser was killed. Tammy Johnson and Teresa Smith echoed the same remarks by stating that Barbara Bivens and Shirley Smith were in an area of the Old Hickory Grill's parking lot. And I want y'all to pay attention to that, because I'm going to show you some other things, and I'm going to show you that this story has changed over the years. So just keep that in mind. We'll come back to that, but let's continue on. So they were in an area of the Old Hickory Grill parking lot where they could not be seen by Buford and Pauline, but they, Bivens and Smith, could see and hear everything that was going on. All right. And then, according to Tammy Johnson, Barbara and Shirley were sitting in a vehicle smoking, and Buford Pusser never saw them. Tammy Johnson elaborated that her mother and aunt told her that the argument was because Pauline was fed up with Buford's affair with a black woman, Pearl Wade. And I find that interesting too. They always make mention that the woman that Buford was seeing was black. That's very interesting. You know, so are they suggesting that if it was a white woman that Pauline wouldn't have minded? I mean, wouldn't she just be upset that it was a woman, period? So I don't know. Well, but keep that in, just kind of put that on the back burner. Teresa Smith stated that her aunt Shirley Smith told her that a car pulled up and that Pauline was screaming at Buford that she was going to ruin him. Tammy Johnson and Teresa Smith both provided that Bivens and Smith heard Pauline tell Buford that she was going to tell things she knew about him and Buford, about Buford taking money from businesses. Now, I only have this one front page here, but I will tell you that the rest of the story is that, Buford, she threatens to take the kids, and then she's going to tell the TBI and the FBI that he's corrupt and all the things he's doing with payoffs and whatnot. And then he basically replies that, well, if she does that, he's going to kill her. And so, okay, so there you have it. So that's the story that's the parking lot story, the famous Hickory Grill parking lot story with the two women, told by two women that weren't there. Now, like I said, I first heard that story before I even saw the TBI report, and I saw it in this book by Mike Elam. And so I'll go ahead and, because I think since it's relevant, I'll go ahead and read the passage. Don't worry, it's not a long passage. I'll get through it quickly. And it's in case you're wondering, it's in camera's not picking it up, but it's in chapter 12, prior to the alleged ambush attack. And there's a section down here called At the Old Hickory Grill. And I'll read it. Just prior to the ambush, Buford showed up one of his favorite places, Junior Smith's Old Hickory Grill on Guys Road, just north of the state line. It was late in the evening when Shirley Smith and Barbara Bivens were outside the establishment near the parking area. Wait a minute. Near the parking area. Well, all right. Well, now I told y'all to remember that. So let's go back. Let's be thorough. Let's put our investigator hats on. Something that the TBI knows nothing about, apparently. Okay, well, let's see. Let's just see. Okay. Now, in the version that's in the TBI report, it says that Barbara Bivens and Shirley Smith were in an area of the Old Hickory Grill's parking lot. So they're in the parking lot in this version of the story. In Mike Elam's version of the story, they are near the parking area. Interesting, no? Is that not interesting? So who's lying? Which version is wrong? I'm going to let you all be the judge of that. You guys can tell me in the comments who's lying. So let's go ahead and minimize that, and I'll get back to the story. So back to this. Remember, this is Mike Elam's book. So Shirley Smith and Barbara Bivens were outside the establishment near the parking area when Pauline arrived looking for Buford. Buford may have sensed trouble as he walked to the car to meet Pauline. Not realizing they were in earshot of Smith and Bivens, Buford and Pauline started to argue. Pauline was questioning Buford about his relationship with Pearl Wade. Wade was a beautiful, light-skinned black girl and the niece of Willie Wade that Buford had been seeing. I guess I should say one of several women Buford had been seeing, as there were several. Pauline was angry that Buford had been seeing, had been with Pearl again, and was demanding that Buford put an end to seeing her. As words were exchanged, Smith and Bivens made every attempt to remain out of sight, not wanting to be seen by anyone, especially Buford, as they listened to Pussers arguing. Pauline and Buford were separated at this time, according to Levon Plunk, and we'll keep Miss Levon Plunk in mind because she's going to come into play later in this video. According to Levon Plunk, Pauline's best friend, as well as TBI investigator Warren Jones, who was also aware of the Pussers' marital issues and problems. Both Plunk and Jones were aware that Pauline had been residing at a motel in Savannah, a small town near Adamsville. Now, I'm going to stop. I'm going to pause briefly right there. I know this is painful. This is painful listening to this story in this book. But if Mike Elam is listening to this video, if you're watching this video, Mike, if you're watching this video, I've got a question for you. You like to throw questions at everybody else. I've got a question for you. Where did you get the story that Pauline was living in a motel in Savannah? Where? Who told you that story? Give us the source. And what was the name? What was the name of that motel, Mike? Tell that you're the one relaying this information. I mean, I just want to know. I'm curious, as we all are. We'd like to know the answers to some of these questions. But let's get back to the story. We'll get back to you, Mike. Don't worry. But back down here, as tempers continued to flare in the parking lot this night, Pauline foolishly threatened to have Buford to leave Buford for good and get a divorce, telling him that she would also contact the FBI, the TBI, and expose his corruption of accepting payoffs and other criminal acts. This angered Buford as he was overheard threatening Pauline, telling her that would be the last thing she would ever do. If she did, she would not live to see the light of day. Both Smith and Bivens took Buford's words to Pauline as being serious threat to her life. Now, understand this was only the beginning of a chain of events involving several people, which would cause many of us who have researched the Pusser legend, yada, yada, yada. So, but that's the important. I just read to you the important part. That's what we need to. We're just worried about this old Hickory Grill parking lot story for now. We'll get to some of the other stuff, the other shenanigans. Now, this book obviously was published 2020. That was the first. That was That was the first time I heard the story or read the story. That was my first mentioning of it. And at the time, I remembered it just seemed odd. It just seemed like an odd. And if you notice, Mike does not tell you in this book where he heard this story. And so, again, Mike, if you're watching this video, please educate us on where you got this information. Who told it to you? Was it Barbara? Was it Shirley? Was it Tammy? Was it Teresa? Was it Dennis? Did Dennis tell you this? These are all questions we'd like to know. I'd like to know. I'll speak for myself. I'd like to know because you didn't give us any references in the book, Mike. Now I know you're writing a new book, and maybe we'll get those references. But all right, so back to what we're here for. I don't want to waste you guys' time. So that's the stories. So you got the one in Mike Elam's book, and you got the one in the TBI report, and they're different. Now notice we don't get exact times. It's very vague on that. They also don't tell us whose car pulled up at the Old Hickory Grill. Was it Pauline's car? Was she driving? Was she a passenger? Who was she with? We don't get any of that information. And unfortunately, the TBI, they don't. Apparently, the TBI is not very inquisitive. I'm just, it strikes me that an investigative body such as the TBI, they just don't seem to be very inquisitive on any of this stuff. People just come, tell them things, and they just blindly accept it. no pushback, no scrutiny, no verification, no corroboration. So, but that's your TBI. I don't know if you got any you get people live in Tennessee. Y'all should be worried about that. Okay, so let's move on. And so that led me to wonder, where did this story come from, and when did it originate? Who originated it? And I knew that Barbara Bivens, she passed away in 2008, like I said, and then Shirley Smith passed away in 2019. Now, Barbara Bivens also published a book in 2003 about her escapades, her experience down in the state line area during that time period. It's called Tommy and Me. Now, I have searched high and low to get a copy of that book, and I cannot find it. However, I have spoken with some folks on social media that have the book and have read the book, and it is not in that book. The parking lot story is, she did not include that in her book. Now, that strikes me as very, very odd. And just to prove that, I'm going to I'm going to throw something up on the screen here. Now, this is an excerpt of that from that book, Tommy and Me, written by Barbara Bivens in 2003. Now, this is shortly. This is the morning of the ambush, and I'll just read through this real quick, and you can tell me if you hear anything about the parking lot story. Says here, when the phone rang early that Saturday morning, I felt like I'd just gone to sleep. It was my cousin Shirley calling from the old Hickory Club, a beer tavern that she and her husband, Junior Smith, owned and operated on the Guys Road in McNairy County, Tennessee. Pauline Pusser just got her head blown off, she said. What? Pauline's dead, Shirley said. Are you sure? I asked in disbelief. From what me and Junior just heard, Buford Pusser's saying that him and Pauline got ambushed on the New Hope Road. New Hope Road? Where's the New Hope Road? It's that little road that cuts off Highway 45 just after you cross the state line into Tennessee. Vaguely, I thought I remembered seeing that little road. What were they doing on that road? I don't know, Shirley said. But he'll say that Towhead White did it. Towhead's in prison, I said. That don't matter, she said. Buford's going to say he was behind it. While I didn't know if Towhead White was involved or not, I knew that for every action there is a reaction. You don't set the house on fire and not expect it to burn down. Buford Pusser set the house on fire when he killed Louise Hathcock. Then the good old boys in Tennessee let the house burn down. Now, nowhere in there is the story about the parking lot. And like I say, this was written in 2003, so Buford was long since dead when she wrote that book. So you can't say, well, oh, maybe she was afraid of Buford, him coming after her or anything like that. Buford wasn't around. He was in the ground, So, and if you were, because remember, these folks are all concerned about justice for Pauline, justice for Pauline. Well, where's the concern for justice for Pauline here in Barbara's book? If she did hear this conversation, wouldn't she want that in the book? Wouldn't she include that little tidbit of information? And wouldn't they? And if Shirley called Barbara that morning, wouldn't she have mentioned that? Well, hey, don't you remember that argument? They were fighting last night and he threatened to kill her. Yeah, it's not in here. Where is it? Where's the story? Especially if, like I said, if you took the time, and remember, she passed away in 2008, so 5 years before she passed, where is this story? wouldn't she want that in there? I mean, if you're trying to sell books and you're trying to tell the truth and get the real story out there, I don't know. Seems like she would have included it, but no. So it's not in the book. And like I said, she passed away. Now, before she passed away, she apparently ran a Yahoo group called Little Chicago, where it was an anti-Pusser site, and she would talk about Pusser and and how he was a murderer and this, that, and the other. And that's how Mike Elam comes in contact with her. Now, this is according to Mike Elam. I'm just telling you his story. This isn't my words. This is from him, and you can read about it. This is all information that you can easily find on Mike Elam's Facebook page, which is Buford Pusser, the other story. That's how I found it. And he claims that that's how he came into contact with Barbara, because she ran that page. And back at that time, he was pro Pusser. And so he would, I guess, argue back and forth with Barbara. She was anti, he was pro. And that's when she supposedly, gives him the autopsy report of Louise Hathcock. And that's what supposedly the thing that changes him from being pro Pusser to anti Pusser. And at some point, they meet, and there's pictures of Mike and Barbara together on his Facebook page. And so apparently they would have had time. He would have had plenty of time to talk to her about all this. And so if that story existed, I'm sure she would have told it to him, you know. But she passes away in 2008. Now Mike Elam starts his Facebook page in 2015, and so I spent quite a bit of time on his Facebook page, searching back through the old posts, and because I want to find this story. I'm trying to find where it started, who told it to him, what's the genesis of this whole parking lot story. And so I went through, and first of all, I'm going to show you let me see if I can get that back up here. I'm going to show you a post from 2015 and see if I can find it. Right here. Now, let me go back here for a second. This is, as you can see, this is from August 11th, 2015, special edition. And this was on, like I said, this is on Mike Elam's Facebook page. So this is a post that he's doing, and he's retelling the events around the morning of the ambush and the events leading up to it. So this is 2015. Now remember, Barbara passed away 2008. So if that story existed, Mike would have known about it. So let's see if he puts it in his little post here. So let's see here. Okay, the real story. Okay. The real story starts out August 11th, many hours prior to the alleged ambush. According to Levon Plunk, Pauline had grown tired of Buford's continual affairs. She had reached the point that she publicly confronted one of Buford's girlfriends. Pauline was indeed a woman who had had enough. Apparently, several people had witnessed the confrontation. Now, Pauline had prepared herself to take back control of not only her own life from her sheriff husband, but those of her children as well. It started with a call to her daughter Diane, who was staying in Memphis with Buford's sister. Pauline begged Diane to come home, telling her that she and Buford are having problems. We now know that Pauline was a mother gathering her flock, and she has decided to leave Buford, and she was taking her children with her. And then we'll go down, let's see here, go down a little bit more. Buford told his barber and Selmer that the family was taking a vacation and was going to visit Pauline's parents in Hayside, Virginia. Pauline told her best friend Levon Plunk of her plans to leave Buford. She also told Levon that when she was in Virginia and safe with her parents, she was going to inform the TBI and the FBI about Buford accepting payoffs with so many club operators, honky tonks, moonshiners, and bootleggers. This is what I learned from LaVon Plunkett. She told me the same story she had told Jerry Hickory 30 years before. LaVon and I discussed many things. That interview, she was convinced that Buford had murdered her friend Pauline Pusser. Now we're going to get into Mr. Dennis Hathcock, and his story. And, we all know the story of Dennis and how he was doing surveillance. And for people that don't know, Dennis Hathcock was the son of W.O. Hathcock. And apparently that night, he and a friend were out riding around on his motorcycle, following Buford around, because apparently that's what kids did back then for fun, was to follow the sheriff around. I know it sounds a little crazy, but it sounded crazy to me. But that's his story. And he's going to go through this whole thing about, Buford was meeting up with different people that night. He met up with this girl that we now know was Ann Henderson in this parking lot at this park by this maintenance area. And then he tells her to leave. And then this other car from Oklahoma comes, and there's a gun exchange, which is interesting. In this version of that story, Buford is receiving the rifles. In the more recent versions of Dennis telling this story, the guy from Oklahoma is received. So Buford's giving the rifles. So that's interesting. So so the parking lot story is not the only story that seems to change. The weapons exchange from Dennis Hathcock also seems to change. But moving on anyway. So there's that, and so he goes through this whole story, but that's not really the important part. Okay, so right here. Okay, Buford finally ends up at the let's move it. That's not really where I wanted to be. I want to get back to the story here. Okay, so the LaVon story. So in the meantime, Pauline Pusser has been out with her friend LaVon. According to LaVon, this would be the last time the two women would see each other for a while, as Pauline was leaving Buford and would be far away from Selmer and the friends she had there. LaVon told me that she took Pauline to the Pusser residence to get a few of her belongings. This was at approximately 2:30 a.m. Now, keep that in mind too. So, because remember, this story in the parking lot takes place in the early morning hours. Now, we don't know. That's pretty vague. That's a wide range of time, but we do know by this at 2:30. By 2:30, she's back at her house. So just keep that in mind. And also, Buford, we'll find out, is, let's see. Well, there's another version where Dennis, because according to Dennis, Buford is leaving after running around all night, various places, meeting up with his girlfriend, doing a weapons exchange, going back to his girlfriend's house, going to some gas station, making a phone call. So he's doing all that. So I don't know if you believe Dennis and LaVon and their stories, then I would posit that it's physically impossible for Buford to be at the old Hickory Grill when these two women are claiming that he was there. But but back to the story with LaVon. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So LaVon told me that she took Pauline to the Pusser residence to get a few of her belongings. This was approximately 2:30 a.m. Pauline invited LaVon inside. However, LaVon declined. Buford had made it clear that the two were not to be seeing each other. Apparently, Buford did not like the idea of the law enforcement wives' little game of going out clubbing, a plan meant to teach their cheating husbands a lesson. Uh, so there you have it. But just to show you the story, and I'm going to let this play through. I'm going to go ahead and and you can see there's no mention of the infamous Old Hickory Grill, parking lot story. It's not in there. That's in 2015. Okay, so we'll pop that down. So 2015, there's no mention of it. So I kept digging, I kept digging, I kept digging. And let's see if I can find out. Again, the next mention of it was in the book. So in 2015, it didn't exist. All of a sudden, it exists in 2020. Weird. And no, and I'll show you something else, because I said that Shirley Smith passed away 2019. So let me show you the post he made. He makes a post in 2021 on his Facebook page. Let's take a look. July 13th, 2021. It says Shirley Smith was pleasant to speak with. However, I didn't learn much from her, as she was very cautious during our conversation. I got the impression that Junior was on an extension listening to every word that was said. And then there's a picture of Shirley Smith. So according to Mike Elam, he had conversations with Shirley Smith. And remember, Shirley Smith was one of the women that was in that parking lot. But according to Mike Elam, he didn't learn much from her. Didn't learn much. Now, I would argue that, if she had told him about that parking lot story, he probably would have said, well, she gave me some key information, or she was instrumental in the story. But he doesn't. He says he didn't learn much from her. So I think it's safe to say at this point that the story did not originate from these two women, and the proof is kind of in the pudding, and if that's, remember, now he wrote this book and he took the information that of that parking lot story, and if that information had been in Barbara Bivens's book, Tommy and Me, I feel like he would have, had to have, paid some kind of homage to that, or made a reference of it. You wouldn't want to be plagiarizing. And then on his Facebook page, again, he's saying this doesn't sound like he got the story from Shirley Smith. Now, like I said, I found a post, and this was August 12th, 2021. This is and I'll go ahead and read it now. We'll see in this post if there's any differences in the story. Is it, are they in the parking lot, near the parking lot, whatever? Let's just go ahead and take a look at it. So it starts out, today is the 54th anniversary of the alleged ambush which took the life of Pauline Pusser. Now, you scroll down. Oh, excuse me here, I'm trying to get it just right here. So if we go down to where it says Barbara Bivens and Shirley Smith, it says, it was another hot August night in McNairy County. The usual crowd is at the Old Hickory Grill this night when Barbara Bivens arrives to visit for a moment with her cousin, Shirley. The two women are just outside the noisy club when another car pulls into the parking lot. Now, it makes no mention of them being in a car, makes no mention of them smoking, and it doesn't really make mention of them being in the parking lot. So they're just outside. They're just outside the club. So right outside the door. When another car pulls into the parking lot, Sheriff Buford Pusser sees the car and approaches it as it comes to a stop. As the door opens, a petite young blonde steps out of the vehicle. It is Buford's wife, Pauline. Let's see. Bivens and Smith take cover, not wanting to be seen as Pauline lights into her husband about it. Now remember, in the other story, they were in a vantage point. They were sitting in a car in the parking lot in such a way that they couldn't be seen, but they could see everything. And they didn't have to take cover. But here they're having to take cover. So I think that's interesting. Uh, so they take cover, not wanting to be seen as Pauline lights into her husband about him seeing a young black girl, Pearl Wade. Again, the black girl. I mean, I don't know what's going on with that. As Buford tries to keep their argument between the two of them, Pauline only gets louder as she demands that he put an end to his womanizing, telling the sheriff if he doesn't, she will take the kids, including Buford's only known biological child, Juana, and leave him. Bivens and Smith continue to listen as she tells her philandering husband that she will file for divorce and also inform the TBI of his corruption, as she knows that her husband has been taking payoffs. Bivens and Smith, still hidden from view, listen closely as they see Buford growing angry. Excuse me. If you do that, you won't live to see the light of day, the sheriff tells his young wife. Bivens and Smith continue to listen to the Pussers argue until Pauline gets back in the car she arrived in and speeds away. The two state-line women wonder about what they have just overheard. Was Pauline seriously considering leaving Buford, and was he serious with his threat to her? Their answer would come in a very short time. Now that's 2021, and let me go ahead and take that off the screen. So get rid of this, and so there you have it, folks. I just went through all of those exhibits, and as we can see, the story comes about mysteriously, and after the two women have passed. Now, I suppose people could make the argument. Well, maybe they told, Teresa Smith and Tammy Johnson. Maybe there was some deathbed confessions going on, but Barbara Bivens seemed like a pretty outspoken, confident, courageous type person. Braggadocial, even, I would say. She loved to talk about herself. She loved to talk about accomplishments. And she also loved to talk about how corrupt Buford was. And so I just can't believe that, or I find it, let's just put it this way, I find it hard to believe that she would have wrote the book, went to all that trouble to write that book, and not include the parking lot story. I just, you guys tell me in the comments. I mean, am I crazy for thinking that? You think I'm out of line for that? But and unfortunately, we have a TBI that, like I said, they're just not very inquisitive. How is it that I, as somebody who's not even in law enforcement, years and years ago, I was an investigator in the Navy. I'm not now. I'm not any kind of investigator. I don't work law enforcement at all, but I'm sitting here and I'm uncovering posts off of Mike Elam's Facebook page. I'm reading his book. I'm coming up with different versions of that story, and the TBI doesn't. If you go and, like I said, go and listen to that audio, you don't hear. If it was me and I was going into that interview, I would have had copies of those other versions of the story, and I would have confronted them about that. Well, why is it that Mike Elam's saying this? He's got it in his book, a different version. Is your version right? Is his version right? Well, why is he wrong? And who told you? When did you find that out? They don't ask any questions ever. any questions ever. Why is that? I mean, it's kind of interesting. But and before we close this out, I will also throw in, and with Barbara Bivens's a little extra tidbit, some bonus coverage for you in the book Tommy and Me that Barbara Bivens wrote, and it's out. I guess the only way you can. That's another thing too, and I'll bring this little point up too. Isn't it interesting that the TBI, they're relying on people that have a financial interest. Some of these people, a lot of these people have a financial interest in the outcome of the TBI report being that Buford is guilty. I mean, the man, Mike Mike Elam, this guy right here who wrote this book, it is you cannot read, you can't get away from Mike Elam in the TBI report. I challenge you. See if you can read more than a couple of pages without a mention of Mike Elam or somebody that Mike Elam has put them in contact with. And so ask yourself, do you think that's a good thing that an investigative agency has taken the lion's share of their information from a man who has a financial interest in the outcome being that Buford is guilty? I mean, what do you think about that? Interesting stuff. And then one of these witnesses that's got this parking lot story, her dead mother, she's selling copies of her dead mother's book. She's the only way you can get that book now, apparently, is if you go through her. You can't go to eBay, you can't go to Amazon and order that. I mean, you might get lucky and find somebody with a used copy, maybe. But if you want a new copy, you got to order it from her. And so, isn't that odd? Isn't that interesting that they're going to go to a meeting with somebody who wrote that? And she brought a copy of that book to the meeting, by the way. And she's another one with a financial interest in this story that Buford's guilty. Could it be that this story came about in an effort to profit, dare I say, profit from maybe reigniting interest in her dead mother's book? These are questions. And like I said, you don't have to be Columbo to come up with this. You don't have to be Columbo to think this way, just to have these questions. Why is it that they're relying on these people? Dennis Hathcock. Now he doesn't have a book out there, but maybe he's interested in reviving his family's image, settling old scores. Remember, his father was beat up by Buford at the Plantation Club, and Buford, he was found not guilty and then became sheriff. Now, you don't think that put a burr in W.O.'s backside? I don't know. These are questions. Now, back to the bonus coverage that I was talking about earlier. If you ever do get a copy of Tommy and Me, there's a section in there where Barbara puts a picture of an M1 30 caliber carbine. Now, what do we know about that? What do we know about that rifle? Is that not the very type of rifle that was used to kill Pauline? Where did she get that rifle? Who did she get it from? When did she get it? And that's also the very same type of rifle, remember, that Petey Plunk's son, Ricky Plunk, gave to Mike Elam. So the question is, What happened to that rifle when Barbara passed away? Where did it go? Who got it? Maybe, perhaps, you think maybe the TBI should have asked that question? You think maybe the TBI, I mean, if they're looking for these murder weapons. I mean, they took Mike Elam's. There was an old rusted rifle that got dug up. They took that. I think there was some other rifles they were looking at. But here's Barbara Bivens, who was, she's floating around in those circles down at the state line. Her boyfriend, Tommy, was buddies with Towhead. I mean, like I said, these are all just questions. These are questions. It's a shame that we don't have investigators these days that want to do their jobs, but it takes people on YouTube, people on Facebook to try to do the investigation that they won't do. But anyway, that's all I've got. This video is almost an hour. I think I've taken up way more than everybody's time. But as always, if you like this video, consider hitting the thumbs up on the way out. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. It helps push the message out to the masses, and I appreciate anybody that watches my videos. And if you got any questions, feel free to. I'm sure I'm going to get some interesting comments in the comment section on this video. But a word on that real quick. I'm not going to be scared off. Okay, anybody that's leaving insulting comments, threatening comments, or whatever in the comment section, it's not going to stop me. Okay, I'm not going to stop doing these videos. If you think it's going to make me cry, it's going to hurt my feelings, just know I spent 20 years in the Navy, deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. So trust me, there's nothing anybody's going to say to me in that comment section that I haven't heard at least a dozen times each. So, but that's it, folks. I hope you guys are, in good health, and hope your week is going well, and I hope your holiday season is going well. And I'm out of here. I will see you guys on the next video. Take care, everybody.